Hi guys, let's finish this stuff off. The last thing that we have to get through is just solving second degree trigonometric equations. Now, realistically, this is almost the exact same as when you were solving regular quadratics back in Math 20 and a bit in Math 30. There's just that one little extra step at the end where you have to address the trig. So, solve each trigonometric equation in the specified domain. The first one that we have is cos squared x minus 1 equals 0. Now, I'm going to solve this one in two ways. I'm going to do it first just by factoring. Sometimes this can help for visualization, but I can say let u equal cos x. And if I let u equal cos x, that basically means that u squared minus 1 equals 0. Now I could have picked any variable for that. I just picked u because that's the common substitution outside of x, which we've already used. Now u squared minus 1 equals 0 would factor to u minus 1, u plus 1 equals 0. And then from here, what I could do is I could resubstitute in the u, and I could go, well, that means that cos x minus 1 and cos x plus 1 would have to equal 0. So then, if I look for where cos x minus 1 equals 0, that would tell me that cos x has to equal 1. And this one would tell me that cos x has to equal negative 1. Now I said that's the first way we're going to get here. We're not quite done this yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly look at the other way that I could have done this. And I could have done this just by saying, well, cos squared x minus 1 equals 0, cos squared x equals 1, and then take the root of both sides, and then I get cos x equals plus or minus 1. The big important thing that I wanted to bring up there is just when we're taking the square root in this case, we're not using the functional definition. So since we're not, that means that we have to have the plus or minus 1. Now, I have cos x equals 1, cos x equals negative 1. Well, what does this mean? We go to our unit circle, and we're going to look for the y values, or sorry, the x values, because we remember the cos is adjacent, which is the x values. And on my unit circle, well, when does x equal plus or minus 1? X equals plus or minus 1 at 0. And notice we're working in degrees, 180 degrees, and 360 degrees. But 360 degrees is not in the domain, so my answer would just very, very simply be 0 and 180 degrees. Moving on, the next one, we get 2 sine squared x equals 1 minus sine x for 0 less than or equal to theta less than or equal to 2 pi. So again, the first thing that I do is I'm going to set this up in a quadratic. 2 sine squared x plus sine x minus 1 equals 0. So I set this up as my quadratic first. Now, some people may be able to handle this with the sine x in there. Other people may want to make the substitution. I let u equal sine x, and I get 2u squared plus u minus 1 equals 0. So now we need to factor this. I'm going to factor this by using decomposition or breaking up the middle term. I get a times c, which is 2 times negative 1 equals negative 2, and my b equals 1. So I need two values that multiply out to negative 2 and add up to positive 1. So that's going to give me positive 2 and negative 1. So I get 2u squared plus 2u minus u minus 1 equals 0. I put the brackets around my first two. I'll use a different color for this. We put the brackets around the first two, brackets around the second two. And I factor a 2u out of my first one, and factoring the 2u leaves me with u plus 1. And I factor a negative 1 out of the second 2, leaving me yet again with u plus 1. So from here, I factor out that u plus 1, and I get 2u minus 1 bracket u plus 1 equals 0. So this tells me that u has to either equal 1 over 2 or u has to equal negative 1. But we know that u is equal to sine x, so I get sine x equals 1 over 2 and sine x equals negative 1. So yet again, what do? I go to my unit circle, which you guys should have handy. Sine is the y values on the unit circle, so I need a y value of 1 over 2, and my y value of 1 over 2 comes working in radians right here, so that will give me pi by 6, and the other one that will give me is 5 pi by 6. And then I look at sine equals negative 1, sine equals negative 1 at pi. Since we're between 0 less than or equal to theta, less than or equal to 2 pi, this would be all of my solutions.